Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to look at Playwright as a test automation tool using Python, and PyTest has two modules for automation. So, Playwright is built. Introduction to Playwright would be that Playwright is a set of APIs to interact with a browser. But not just interact, the library itself contains assertions and various other tools along with reporting, like reporting and other tools to help us automate, test, and automate browsers. Right, so it's a testing first tool which has a lot of features built into it. We will be using Python and Playwright, and of course PyTest for as a testing framework. Right, the scope of this session is just to introduce you to the idea of what can be done with Playwright and how it works at a very superficial level, without going into the details too much, but also to show you the power of and the ease of use of a library like Playwright, that anybody with a little bit of programming knowledge can automate and start using the application. Right. So today we're going to automate something called a website called Sauce Labs, right? So Sauce Demo, sorry, from Sauce Labs, which has a basic login interface, and then it is an e-shopping website. So we will just add a few objects to the cart and take it from there, right? So let's go ahead. Right. So the first thing what we need to do is we need to start to read these objects so that we can interact with them, right? So Playwright, there are two ways to do this, right? There is one traditional Selenium way where we inspect the elements, as you can see here, and we find the different address of those particular elements. For those of you who are new to test automation, you will understand that you're traditionally in test automation, you have to find address of a particular element, right? For those who already know automation, it will be similar to XPath and CSS and those kind of IDs and locators, right? So finding an address of a particular element, it has to be unique, such that you can interact with it, right? Just like your house address, right? Your house address has to be unique within a city, otherwise the mail will get sent elsewhere. So in the same way, when you're interacting with the web element, any element on a web page, the address has to be unique. Now there are two broad ways of doing that. The first way is obviously the Selenium way, where you navigate through the DOM that you see here, the HTML of the page. You go to the different places in the page and pick that particular element and validate. But Playwright has another way, right? It is there are a few APIs already available with us, so we will get into that as we write code, right? So the first thing we're going to do right now is to start our project, right? So we are going to just open a small open a file. So I'm going to call it test tutorial. Right, and in this file, the first thing that we need obviously is the Playwright module. So let me get, so from Playwright, yeah, so I just need the sync Playwright for now, right? And since we are using PyTest, we need to follow the PyTest convention, which is prefixing every test with the word test, and then maybe the test name, right? So here what we're going to do is we're going to go to the shopping cart, right? So we're going to test out the shopping cart functionality. So let me go to just call it test cart, right? Then we will initialize the Playwright object that we're going to use, the library that we're going to use. And we are going to pass it to a page. The page element is going to help us interact with the browser, right? In this case, we are going to use Chromium, which is basically the open source version of Chrome, almost close to what Chrome does, except for a few closed source bits. So for our test, this should be fine. It's also going to be, we're also going to have it in a head, there are two ways. So Playwright by default launches the browser headless, which means you won't see the browser on your screen. It will be running in the background. But to avoid that, because we want to see what's happening, we will use one parameter here to say headless false, right? So that way we can see what's happening. And we will just assign it to a new page, right? So the new page basically ensures that there is a new instance. So Playwright handles browsers differently than Selenium or WebDriver IO. Playwright has a native interaction with the browsers, which makes the test faster and more accurate with less flaky tests, right? I'm sure those of you who are already in automation, whether it's Selenium or any other tool, one of the chief complaints is flakiness, right? So Playwright seeks to address that by having a different protocol communicating with the browser. So you can go into depth with this on the Playwright documentation. For now, that's out of the scope of this session. We will just interact with the browser for now. So we have page. The one thing I'm just going to do is I'm going to set a default timeout, because the default timeout for Playwright is 30 seconds. So I'm just going to set it to 5 seconds. Right? This is in milliseconds, so 5 seconds. Now we need to interact with it, right? So first thing what we have to do is open the browser. So go to is our option. So our method. So we are going to copy the URL and we're going to go to it. And actually let's run this and see how it works, right? So let me clear this out. And how do I run a test? I'll just run the pytest prefix and go to the particular test. Okay, I moved in the wrong folder. Yeah, now it will find it. Right, and we will just click on run. So it should open a browser now and it should enter the values, right? So it was so fast that you couldn't even see what was happening, but yeah, so it should do that. Now what we need to do is we need to enter the username and password. As I was explaining to you, Playwright provides native ways of interacting with the elements, right? So to find out which are those native ways, a quick way to do it is type in just get by, and you will see these few ways that Playwright has. So these would be what I would call priority selectors or locators, because Playwright asks the user to use these before using other locators like XPath and CSS and ID and everything else, right? So let's start with this, so that since we are using Playwright, because for those of you who are not more used to using Selenium, I would suggest to pick up what Playwright is asking us to do, right? So we need to interact first with the username. So let's go to the username. As usual, we'll do an inspect and we'll see that it has a placeholder value, right? So here I've chosen placeholder. You could choose any of the others, whatever is accurate and whatever is available. And Playwright has two ways of interacting with a text element. One is fill and one is type. Fill is all text at once. Type is more akin to a user, where there is one keystroke at a time, right? So in this fill, I will use whatever password has been provided, username, sorry, and then we will go to the password part. As you can see here also, I will use placeholder, and similarly I will find the placeholder for the password. And instead of fill, I'll use type just to simulate what it would be, right? So type, and the password I think is secret sauce, right? So we'll do that, and then we will have to click on login, right? So now login does not have a placeholder, so I'll have to use something else for login. So let's do a get by and see what else we can use. So we see here there's get by text, right? Now I know what the login button is. Clearly the only login button on this page, and it has text. So I'll just give get by text login. So in this case, I didn't even need to look at the HTML of this page, right? When there is a login button available with the text on it. So I'll just do get by login, and obviously I'm clicking on it. And then finally we need to assert. What we need to assert? That this page is logged in, right? So if I log in, I will get a page that has a title, right? Swag Labs. How do I know that? If you go here into head and you look for the title, you will see a title value, right? So this value I'll copy out and I'll say assert page dot, very intuitive, title, right, is equal to whatever text I have given, right? So this should be our first test, just a basic login test, right? So let me run it and see if it works. If it doesn't work, we will try and fix it. Centering, right? So you can see it passed in 5.5 seconds. It's pretty quick. It actually, you were able to see because I put type in. If I just change this to fill, you will see that the test will be even faster, right? So the same thing we're going to do here. We're going to run it. And there you go, right? The test is done. So it's fast. It did the job. The test passed, etc. Now we will move into one validation that we want to do for this cart. So what is the validation that we want to do? You can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements here. We want to add them to our cart and we want to make sure that there are the number of items added are 6, right? So what would be the way to do it? The first thing is we need to get all of these items, right? So they are buttons with an add to cart on them, right? So let's do that. Now we will store all of them in a variable because there are 6 of them, right? So we'll get a list of them. So we will call it add to cart buttons, something like that, right? And how will we identify them? Page get by, we will use again playwright's get by, and we will use a get by role, right? You again, as I said, you could use other ones, but since there is a button already and we know that these buttons, there is no other add to cart button that if you click something else will happen. So I'm going to use this and I'm going to give the name equal to whatever the name of the button is, right? Add to cart. We can just copy it from the, right? And we need all of them, right? So this would return only one. We need all of them. So I'm going to give a dot all. This is again inbuilt into playwright. So you see how simple it is to automate getting all the values of a particular button, right? And then I'm just going to run this. Or actually, let us make one more test where we will. So I am expecting there to be 6 buttons, right? So let me assert that there are 6 buttons, right? So let us assign that to a variable count of items, let us say, and we'll assign that to a variable. That should be that should be equal to, because this is a list. This method returns a list of all the elements. So the length of this list should indicate the number of buttons that are available on the page, right? And then we'll assert to make sure that there are 6. We will assert count of items equal to 6, right? So this is our second test. So let me just run this. We'll run it using. Right now, it again very quick, but let's do one more thing. Let us try and add all these to the cart, right? So let us see what happens, right? Something interesting is going to happen here. So for example, let me just add all of these to the cart. So what would I do to add all of them to the cart? I would just go, again, the scope of Python and for loops is out of that, but let's say for button in add button to cart, add underscore, right? What every time I have to click on them, right? So I do button dot click, right? Okay, and let's see what happens, right? Something interesting is going to happen here. So it should click 6 times, right? and it fails. And herein lies the beauty of playwright. As you can see here, we have given, it's a very descriptive error message saying it's a descriptive error message saying that we can interact with that particular element, but there is an nth item here, and this nth item is because playwright gets all of them into this button, but by the time it tries to click the fourth item, nth being 3 plus 1, it is missing, right? And the reason is because these items in the add to cart page are loaded dynamically. So what we need to do is refactor this a little bit such that we can get the items, and one way of doing that is by adding the items from the end to the first, right? So let me show you how we can refactor this, right? So the first thing is we'll remove this part of the code because clearly this is not working because it will keep failing on the third or the fourth item, right? So we will refactor that in a minor way. So we will get the range, okay? And we will start from the obviously count of items, right? So the last one, right? And so because it's array index, so we have to start from one less. We will break only when it is -1 because we are breaking at 0 because of the way Python handles indexes. And finally, we'll decrement it, right? So we'll start at the top. We'll start at the 6th item, 5th item, 4th item, 3rd item, 1st item, and then 2nd item, and then we'll go, right? So this is where what we'll do now. How do we interact with that, right? So that's we'll do a get by role again. Right, and this time instead of giving all of our items, actually we could just copy out the text from here, right? Dot nth, right? So nth is the method to say which item it's interacting with. So nth item, and within the nth item we will give I. So it will start off at index, because this is 6, so it will start off 6 minus 1, 5, which is the 6th element, the 5th index, 6th element, and it will click on it, right? And in this way we can click all of them, and then let's add an expect as well, right? So for this I need to import it, so I'll just import it from here, and we will add an expect. What are we expecting? That this cart value, how do we expect the cart now? So actually let me just go back and add a few just to make sure. Yeah, so you can see here, you see this button at the top, right? There is a badge here, cart shopping badge, and a class cart shopping badge, right? This badge has 2, but we also have a div ID, cart shopping cart container. Now here we will use the XPath, or rather the ID, right? So we have an ID. IDs usually are unique in a page. So as you can see here, we have this ID here, and this ID reflects this particular element, right? It contains this number 2, which in our case will contain number 6, right? So we will copy this out, and we'll call page dot. Now, since we are not using playwright's inbuilt ones, we'll be using locator, and we'll go to locator, right? And we will paste the locator here, right? And ID obviously, because you need the hashtag for the CSS, right? Don't CSS selectors and handling CSS selectors are out of scope of this class, but for an ID you need to use hash. And I will say to be to contain text, to contain text 6, right? Why do I use 6? Why do I use to contain text? Is because everything that is read from a page is read in the form of a string, so it has to be text, right? Let's try this and see if it works. Okay. So our previous test failed. Let's try if this works. So it's logged in, done it all, and there you go. It's passed, right? And to validate, let's say by mistake, I wanted to check if it is actually adding 7, right? I want to make sure negative test case. So let's try that, right? In case you can see here 6, so it's going to fail. Let's give it 5 seconds, and there you go, right? So as you can see here, it's extremely easy to interact with web pages using Python and Playwright. What we did was in barely 10 to 15 minutes, we were able to write an entire test to automate this application, right? And this process is made even faster with other tools like Code Generator, which Playwright provides. But that is out of the scope of this session. So yeah, the next session, we will delve deeper into Playwright and its functionality and all the benefits that it provides for us. Thank you.